May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. I find this to be a very poignant passage, sort of bittersweet. As the disciples come towards the end of Jesus of Nazareth's life, and there's this tension between what we know, that Jesus is going to die and that the temple in 70 AD is going to actually be destroyed by the Romans. What we, the readers, know, and what these disciples know, this excitement and happiness of the disciples, because they've finally arrived in Jerusalem. And they're in this incredibly stunning cathedral. I'm talking like the Notre Dame of temples, right? It is beautiful, shining, white stone that people say you could see from miles away. The historians talk about golden vines of grapes where grapes were as big as a man. You know, just beautiful, beautiful. A temple worthy of assuring eternal remembrance, and perhaps even winning over subjects who had come to hate you for your brutality, or so Herod thought, since this was the temple that he built for the Jewish people. It is a wonder of the ancient world and the center of Jewish worship for them. Beautiful, beautiful. And the disciples are understandably impressed by the beautiful stones, awed by the gifts dedicated to God, and probably, as we would be walking into Notre Dame or into Washington Cathedral, probably super proud of their faith and heritage. I imagine that for them, it would feel like things were finally coming together. Their time was at hand. Jesus was here, the Messiah, and a magnificent temple had been built for their God. So what if it was built by a cruel king who had been put there by the Romans? That was beside the point. Their time was coming. Their final destiny, the destiny of the Jewish people, was upon them. The time when they would rise in glory. The time they'd waited for and prayed for. Things would finally be the way that they were supposed to be. A time for worship and study and celebration and love. And oh, Jesus just shakes his head and smiles. Oh, my disciples, you still don't get it. None of this matters, because it's all coming down. No stone will be left on top of another stone. Do not put your faith in this. Think about it. If you've read this chapter 21, right before it, it's only been minutes since Jesus has pointed out to them the widow putting her 2 small coins into the offering, and the wealthy people putting their riches and wealth into the offering. And he says to them, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had to live on. The fancy stuff didn't matter. There's this tendency in human beings to want to wait, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one who's done this. You want to wait until circumstances are just right before we act, till we have the right timing, the right housing, the right circumstances, etc. Like so many Americans, particularly women, I've gone on my share of diets. And I don't know about all of you, but there's been plenty of times when I have put off starting my diet until after the wedding, the birthday, the holidays, the night out with friend, that thing of ice cream I want to have tonight. And what happens is, because I'm going to start the next day, I splurge on the day before I start. So I eat more than I would have started had I not been thinking, oh, the right timing will be then, or then, or then. And then we do this. It might be on spending. It might be on waiting to call someone with whom you need to reconcile. I'll call them after Christmas. I'll call them on their birthday. I'll call them after I've talked to that person. Or it might be starting a new job. Well, I can't start the new job until I've X, Y, and Z saved, and I need to finish this project. You all know it. We wait for the right timing, for favorable conditions, for the beautiful Messiah and the temple. And in the meantime, we often idle, which is what Paul was warning against. We idle in our call. The great writer and theologian C.S. Lewis put it this way. And he was talking to a group of young men in World War II about going off to the war. He said, "We are always falling in love or quarreling, looking for jobs or fearing to lose them, getting ill and recovering, following public affairs." We knew that from this week. "If we let ourselves, we shall always be waiting for some distraction or other to end before we can really get down to work." But he says, "The only people who achieve much are those who want knowledge so badly that they seek it while the conditions are unfavorable." They want something so badly that they seek it even when conditions are unfavorable. Because he goes on to say, as Jesus did, favorable conditions never come. If they do, they're fleeting. We may think they do, but they don't. Think back on your life. Do they really? Not really. But that widow didn't wait. Jesus certainly didn't wait. The conditions were certainly not favorable to him. And Jesus tells us in this passage that we shouldn't wait either. Favorable conditions are elusive and transitory. Even when you are standing in a gorgeous temple with your Messiah. God, I feel for those disciples. Even when you're standing in that temple with your beautiful Messiah, you have to know that soon that temple will fall, that nation will fight nation, that the earth will quake and plague will come and your Messiah will die and you will suffer. You need to know that. And in the midst of this human condition, a condition that is always a mixed one, always offering us some way out of our call, our work, always throwing roadblocks in our way, in the midst of all that, my friends, Jesus calls us and he promises us, you will not perish. You will not perish. If there is some call that you have been waiting on, that you have been waiting for favorable, for good, or even perfect conditions, have faith. Go ahead and answer the call. The call from Jesus. The call from your heart. Perhaps it's someone with whom you need to reconcile a job. You've been looking for a job you want to leave. Maybe it's a call to volunteer somewhere. But you're just saying, well, I need to clear my plate of this and I need to do that. Or it's some creative work you want to do. I'll tell you, I know as a writer, it's a lot easier to imagine that novel and how great it's going to be than to actually write it. Jesus tells us in this passage that there will never be a perfect time. But remember that faith is not certainty. Faith is taking the leap, confident in love, even when conditions aren't favorable, even when you're not 100% sure, because the temples will fall. The nations will rise up against each other. The earth will quake. And this is why we're here, Jesus tells us I will be there. I will be at your side. I will give you the words you need to speak. I will give you comfort. I will guide you. I will protect you. The time may never be perfect, but the time is now.